Okay, good morning. It looks like we may have some people still joining us, but I want to get started. So I'm going to just read through the participant list, and if I don't say your name, let me know so I can make sure I record you for attendance. So I have Jeff Olson, Brent Irving, Tina Carton, Charles Welge, Dave Wooden, Fred Mastriani, Jeanette Cato Marino, Jen Hogan, Jen Vigiani, Jim Levy, John Mitchell, Lauren Stairs, Lindsay Garney, Meg O'Leary, Rima Shemaya, Rogerio Rodriguez, Sam Moriali, Valerie Dean, Linda Vonderheide, Meg Webster. And then there's a phone number, 518-218. The number keeps jumping around. 51. Is there someone who's joining us by phone that wants to introduce themselves? If you want to be anonymous, I guess that's fine. Okay, I think that's it. Did I miss anybody that's on the call right now?
Yeah. Steve Braspis with CDPHP Cycle.
Got it. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks.
All right. So welcome to the September Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting. We have been meeting virtually for, I think it's like 15, 16 months now, and we haven't had to cancel any meetings. This, I think, is our longest meeting streak. So congratulations to everyone for that. If you have any questions or comments during the presentation, please put them in the chat. I see Tina says, if that is your screen, we see your other tabs. Okay. You see my whole screen, huh? Let's see. So you didn't see a Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee PowerPoint? No? You would think by now I would get this down.
We did earlier, but now there it is.
You see it now?
Back. Yep,
Huh.
it's back.
Okay. Sorry about that. Let's make sure that I can see the chat. Okay, so thank you for letting me know that. Again, we've been meeting for a very long time virtually, and I still haven't mastered Zoom. So, so welcome. Some COVID-19 updates has been our regular meeting format. Cdtc staff is in the office right now, actually 4 days per week, but we are, we're 3 days a week, and we're moving to 4 days a week starting the week of September 20th, just so that you can more easily reach us by office phone. We are not allowing visitors without appointments, and we are requiring all of our visitors to wear a mask. So please know that before coming. And we will continue to hold most of our meetings virtually. Some of our meetings that require people to be here in person, or that we're encouraging people to be here in person, mostly our planning committee and policy board, because there's voting. Those meetings are also being live streamed to YouTube, and there is a Zoom option. So we're trying to implement this hybrid model and continue to work on it, and hopefully make it so that everyone involved can still interact and participate. So just let us know if we schedule a meeting and you can't be here in person, you'd like to participate virtually, and we will definitely accommodate that. And of course, we continue to monitor the evolving situation, and we will let everyone know if there are any changes to our in-office schedule. Okay. So With that, I'm going to introduce someone that many of you know very well and who has been in the region for a long time and has done so much for bicycle and pedestrian planning and active transportation across the country and here in the region. Jeff Olson. He's going to talk about active transportation and evolving technology. And I recently saw Jeff at a technology event. So he was the first person I thought of because I think that these two worlds don't usually cross over, but we're starting to see a lot of crossover, and they're having some real world implications for planning and programming that a lot of local government and regional governments and obviously state agencies are now dealing with. So with that, Jeff, I'm going to pass it over to you, and I'm going to change it to I'm not sharing my screen, and we can just all see you. And yeah, if anyone has questions or anything, I'll have them put them in the chat, and then we can take it from there.
All right, good morning, everyone, and greetings from Saratoga Springs. I wish we could all be in person, but it's just the way of the world right now, and it's sort of the perfect lead-in to what we're going to talk about is how active transportation and new mobility are shaping up in response to pandemic and climate change and social equity issues that we're seeing all over the world. And I'm going to kind of go through just sort of three bits, what the global picture looks like, what's happening nationally, and then really try to focus on the technology and how that applies to us here locally. It's great to see a lot of friendly faces out there. There's also a lot of new people. For those of you who don't know me, I was the bicycle and pedestrian program manager for New York State DOT in the 1990s. I left to work for the White House for a bit, running the National Millennium Trails program. I was on the faculty at UAlbany for a couple decades, and many former students in the room today, which is always great to see. I was a partner at Alta Planning and Design for a long time, and one of our last really big projects for me was the Empire State Trail, which I'm very happy to see completed this year. And I have now moved on to other new adventures that we'll talk about in a minute. While at Alta, we also had a sister company that grew bigger than its parents and became City Bike and most of the major bike shares in North America. So we had a very direct hand in the growth of the shared mobility movement, ran the largest fleet in North America, and have continued to see that expand at a substantial way, and a lot of real exciting change going on. So that's just by way of background. I am long-term Capital Region resident and very, very happy to be in New York State and spend our lives here. So at the global scale, I've joined the advisory board of the World Resources Institute, doing a lot of work on climate change and adaptation and response to these major global issues. And I just want to note a couple examples of things that I think are symbolic of what we're trying to see occur. In the UK, in response to the pandemic, they passed a funding program that provided 2 billion British pounds for active mobility projects that were fast-tracked, or many are already built now. Almost every city throughout England has built some form of new project. And that happened in the time that we've kind of been debating that here in this country and maybe not taking as much direct action. We'll get to that in just a minute. Sort of different part of the world, in Ethiopia, in Addis, they had done some analysis that I've always said, we basically need two pie charts, one that shows us what mode share is and one that shows us what we want it to be, and spend money accordingly. If we could do those two things, we'd probably get to make a lot of change happen. And they did exactly that. And they have now, when they realized that 51% of mobility in Addis Ababa was being done on foot as pedestrians, they have now reallocated their funding to be spending more than 50% of their public works investment for pedestrians. And those are the kinds of changes. If that can happen in London or Addis, it can happen here in the capital region as well. At the national scale, and those of you who follow the wonderful sport of our national politics, we are about to hopefully pass a massive infrastructure program in this country, funded in the trillions of dollars. And I'm honestly pretty disappointed that we have not been able to fund a proportionate amount of that to non-fossil fuel using travel, active mobility, walking and biking, the modes that we're here to talk about today. There was a big push by East Coast Greenway, who I've been involved with for many, many years, to get $10 billion for Greenway stimulus. More than 200 organizations signed on to that nationally, and it has not really gone anywhere yet. And yet there have been, there was 10 billion yesterday that just the transit industry alone was asking for. They've had probably 50 to 100 billion in post-pandemic funding already. And I'm not saying that's not necessary. I'm just saying we've got to balance the playing field. The airlines, the bridge and road industries have all received massive, massive handouts in this period of time. And we're not seeing the same thing happen. We're going to see, at best, a renewal of the programs that we've been working on for many years, many of which are long and slow to deliver projects. And we're not going to see that kind of quick response. And if we're not responding to climate change, we should be responding to social equity. If we're not responding to both of those, we've got to respond to the pandemic in the short term. And I just don't think that we have reached a level where we are making those kinds of decisions at the national level. To bring things back to to what's going on regionally, locally, and to talk about technology, certainly the completion of the Empire State Trail. I've worked on a lot of things in my life, and probably none has made me smile more. Just locally, that we're here at the nexus of the trail system across New York State, we saw some responses in changes in complete streets and improvement projects that were done to respond to this pandemic. We've certainly seen more outdoor dining than we probably have seen in 100 years. But we're also sort of watching some of that erode and go back. We're going to start to see many of those outdoor spaces not made permanent. And that is definitely a step in the wrong direction. We need to really rethink how public space is allocated. And a big part of that is micromobility, and a big part of micromobility is electrics. And if you travel to almost any other region at this point, you will see more new mobile devices that have electric power than you can possibly imagine. I feel like I keep seeing more and more and more one wheels, scooters, bikes, skateboards, wheelchairs, all kinds of mobility assist devices that are just every time we turn around, there's another one that you haven't seen before. Certainly the electric bikes, very popular around here. The scooters we're just starting to see, and as you know, Cdtc is starting their rollout. McKinsey and Company has estimated that the market for electric micromobility globally will be between $300 and $500 billion within the next decade. The growth in other regions, if you look elsewhere, it has been significant, it has been fast, and it requires all kinds of changes from new street designs and speed limits and permissions to even allow these devices to either exist in law or to exist on our streets. It took New York State about 7 years to allow electric bikes and scooters to be made legal. And at that pace, we are not going to get ahead if we are that slow to respond to trends. And if we are that slow, other places will certainly pick up the slack. The Wall Street Journal referred to micromobility as the Wild West. And I can certainly say from the time that we sold our bike share operations, and they've since been acquired by Lyft, it just continues to change and evolve at an incredibly rapid pace. One of the startups that I'm involved in right now, and the demo that Jen referred to just a few minutes ago, was a project that NYSERDA provided some initial funding to, a company called Recharge. And our premise is that all of these devices are going to be out there and no one knows how to charge the batteries. And Steve, I know you're there from Cdta today. We've talked about this and been collaborating. It is really a significant problem, whether you own your own individual device or you're using part of a shared fleet. They've all got to get plugged in. They all have to charge somehow. And that process has not been fully figured out yet. Our solution that we've developed and now have a full working prototype, and we're starting to move to the next phases, is to charge those devices wirelessly and to be able to charge multiple types of those devices. So whether you've got a scooter or a one wheel or a bike or a skateboard or any other low powered electric device in public space, there will be stations that you can use to very easily just pull up, as long as you have a receiver on your device, connect to a wireless transmitter that will provide that electricity. One of the big challenges we run into actually is very similar to all the legislative and global issues we just talked about, is that there's tremendous amounts of funding coming to charge electric cars, to charge electric buses, to charge all kinds of high-powered electric things, but that funding is not being made eligible to charge the low-powered electric things. And it is, I feel like I'm repeating 30 years of my career, you know, where we're pushing a rock up a hill and fighting against that tide. And you know, if the Teslas and Fords and the rest of the world get all this money to provide thousands and thousands of car charging stations, all we're going to see is more electric cars, and which are great. I drive a plug-in car myself, but it doesn't solve all the other problems we have. It doesn't get people outdoors more. It doesn't change the way our cities move. The same traffic congestion problems exist, on and on, as you all well know. Not to mention all of those heavy-duty batteries are at some point going to need to get reused and recycled, and that creates its own, you know, future waste stream problem. So, and the electricity to run them. So, you know, unless that changes here in New York State, and NYSERDA has been very good to us, so I don't want to make this sound negative, but the Volkswagen settlement money, more than $750 million is being invested in charging, and $700 million of that is going to charge electric cars, and bikes and scooters were not eligible for that funding. That's just the way the program got set up, right? We're going to see the same thing in coming out of the new infrastructure bill in Washington, where last I checked, there were billions available for electric car charging, but not the same amounts available for charging other things. In fact, most recently there was excitement, I guess, because businesses that provide micromobility charging stations will get a 30% tax credit. That was about the extent of the, so there's not even actual funding, it's just a tax credit, and it's only for a third of those stations. So we are constantly, those of us in the active mobility world, seem to always be faced with having to fight our way up a hill. Even after all the progress and building things like the Empire State Trail and getting City Bike to happen, and hundreds and thousands of other projects that have moved forward, it's not always an easy thing. And yet, you know, we are seeing, I'll just wrap up by saying we really are seeing the market make that change happen. And so we're at this point where the demand for what people want is not exactly being met by the programs that are being provided. That results in innovation and change happening in maybe less expected ways, but they are still going to happen. And in fact, I'm heading out on Monday to the Micromobility America conference, and I can guarantee if you ask me next week, I'll probably tell you I just saw 25 other things that I'd never heard of before. And that level of innovation is happening, and it's coming out of people all over the world realizing that we do have to get back to, you know, what I started with a few minutes ago. We are dealing with massive amounts of inequity in society. We have huge problems in responding to the pandemic and everything that means. And even if we do get through those two things, climate change is here. You're going to see it in Texas today. We certainly saw it in our region last week, in the last 2 weeks with the big storms. Where my son lives in Canada, they had 1 million acres burned this summer, which is about, put that in scale, that's about 1/5 of the Adirondack Park. The magnitude of what is going on requires an immediate response, not a let's figure this out 10 years from now. And that's what we're working on. So I want to kind of wrap it up with that and just say, for anyone here that wants to get a hold of me, I think a lot of you literally know where I live. Happy to answer questions now, depending on how much time we have, or just send me an email and we'll go from there. So thanks for your time.
Thanks, Jeff. Do you mind sticking around and answering a couple of questions?
No, I'm fine. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, great, thanks. So if anyone has a question and wants to unmute themselves and ask or put it in the chat, I can read it. But I think just to start it off, one thing that comes up often when we talk about micromobility in our group and even, just across the region in meetings when we talk about these new devices being introduced is kind of like the speed differential on trails and on facilities that were built for people powered bicycling and scootering and other kinds of rolling. So, what are you seeing across the country, or what are your recommendations for kind of managing these new this speed differential, and how we can not shun any new type of non-vehicle transportation, but also keep other people who can't maybe afford one of those devices yet or aren't comfortable on those devices yet also feel safe and welcome in those trails and other spaces?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's the same question we're asking on our streets. If you ride a bike at a comfortable, 12 miles an hour or so, you don't want to get passed by a car going 60, and you need more space and be able to do that. And the same should be happening on a trail. If you're walking, and something goes by much faster than you, there's a challenge to that. Can you guys hang on 1 second? I have a just 2-second thing I'm going to have to do, and I'll be right with you.
After Jeff finishes answering this question, I think Tina has a question, and then there's a question in the chat already.
Apologies,
Go ahead,
but
Jeff.
my daughter is just going to get on the train to go back to New York City, and I need to say goodbye to her. So sorry for the interruption. But,
don't worry.
yeah, if like the rest of us, you've had so little of that in these 18 months. Every second of it is absolutely valuable. So how do we balance out that speed issue? At least by legislation we have, in that the electrics that are allowed should be ones that are compatible. So there are 3 types of electric vehicles that are allowed in most states and most legislation. There's the lower speed ones, which are regulated at an under 20-mile-an-hour speed, have no throttle. You have to be pedaling in order to keep moving. Those are pretty good because those are basically operating at the speed of a bicycle, only allowing people to move without pedaling quite as much. Where we're going to end up with throttle activated and faster devices, which inevitably are going to be out there, because if people make them, people are going to buy them, whether they're legal, not, or otherwise. And I agree, we've got to make sure, particularly on our paths, that those are designed and managed accordingly. And I don't think they really should be there. In my opinion, if you've got something going that fast, you should be back on the street. The problem is our streets and roads aren't always well designed, so people jump onto the paths because they themselves feel safer. So really, all of that needs to balance itself out. And when you look at New York City's answer, for example, is a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit for the whole city. And I think that is one quick way to get to a major amount of change happening. Obviously, in New York State, we have some difficulty in allowing municipalities to do that, but that to me would be the one thing if we could really address. And I'll get to the next question, but I want to follow up. I know this question's coming, and I might as well just go straight to it. There is a significant issue in terms of the change in physical activity that people will experience. And as somebody who has biked my whole life and walks all the time, and really believes that that's important for personal health and all that, you got to also realize there's a tremendous population out there that would do these things if it was a little easier. And if they could get through that hot day, or not have to climb a hill, or not everybody is like me and looks for the steep hills to go climb, right? And there are days where that's just the right thing. And I think that it's really no different than having a car and not using it all the time. You're going to have electric devices that you use, and you won't necessarily use those all the time either. Yes, it does require some energy to run them, and that's energy that's not expended by the humans using them. And I wish we all lived in the Netherlands and everybody just rode their bikes and we'd be fine. But it's an interesting debate, but I think at some point it's fair to recognize that electrics will open the market to a large number of people who otherwise would not choose to get out of their cars in the first place.
Thanks, Jeff. Yes. There's a question from Tina Carton.
Yeah, hi Jeff. Thanks a lot. I actually just sent a slide to Jen Saponis. I'm a co-chair of a rental efficiency group, and one of the things that really kind of brought the whole issue of kind of commuting up to me recently is we're always working on kind of energy efficiency for for low income. And what really struck me from this one slide was the energy cost burden of commuting. And I
Can
just
you
kind of,
see the slide? Is
yeah,
it up?
we
Okay.
can. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I just kind of wanted to share it. We have your chat right in the, oh no, that was my chat. Yeah, I just wanted to share it with everyone because one of the things that I think the electrification of this type of transportation does is really create better equity, and it creates opportunities for people, especially like, I use my bike or I walk to get to work. I don't have to worry about parking. In areas where you have to pay for parking, you don't have to worry about that with these types of electric bikes, where people who, potentially are not real bikers can start going longer and longer distances. And I do think one of the things, I'm not sure how you're going to build in with NYSERDA or any of the work you're doing, electrification, but really for these types of things in cities, but really looking at workplace charging and looking at the right of way and bike racks and how we're going to provide facilities for charging. And if we can move these charging companies like ChargePoint and Flow and Blink to also be providing services for, just regular 110 charging off of them.
Right. Right.
Because the Amtrak station in Rensselaer County had a real issue when they first opened. When I guess not when they first opened, but when electric cars really first started going there. And I think I don't is Brett on the call today? I think he
I am.
remembered people were actually charging their cars off a 110 outlet that they had in the
Yeah, that's you're correct on that one, Tina. There was a auxiliary household plug that we were plugging in snow removal equipment like snow blowers to, and people found it.
Yeah, so I do think that, in terms of any of the planners that are on the call, we really need to start thinking of, how do we promote for employers and for also like multifamily developments, creating those types of hubs. I know Jeff is a fan of these types of things, but I was just in Toronto, and when you get to the train station, they have these amazing you know bike areas where you can park your bike. They have amazing areas in the subway where you can park your bike to get to and from transportation. But how are we going to start building in those? How do you think, Jeff? Because I also know how electricity works. I know how metering works. So how are we going to build in those areas to charge in more public facilities?
Yeah, and I think that's really at the core of the question, because it goes back to how we rethink how public space has been used. And if you look at Columbus Avenue in Manhattan right now, the number of in-street restaurants that happened during the pandemic, those kinds of spaces that exist, whether it's physically in the center of the street like that, or curbside, or in other spaces within our developed areas, some of that's going to be places where people charge things up. And if you think of, and I keep using City Bike as an example because it's such an easy one, but it could be CDTA's bike share as well. Those station locations sited well with power to them suddenly become these mobility and electricity hubs in communities. And that is probably not at a point yet where we can use solar to charge them until we get some better batteries and better solar panels, which are being worked on. So we do need grid connections to do that. And then if that can be made wireless and the devices don't have to all have adapters or plugs or proprietary connectors, pretty much anybody who's got anything can use it to charge up there. And that's again, that's what Recharge is working on now. But it's, as I said to somebody recently, it's no less a long shot than it was launching bike share in a dozen cities across North America. At that time, nobody thought that made any sense. We didn't have a whole lot of public money to have access to. We were fighting up against exactly the same kinds of trends. So it's still a long shot. As you said, it's necessary for so many reasons. And when you do look at those household costs and the challenges of getting through so many people getting through the day, this would make it so much easier to get to the store, to have one less car in a household, to be able to go to work, go to school, particularly the shared systems where, look, electric bikes and scooters and devices are not inexpensive, but operated as fleets, they can basically run at a fairly low cost. And you're starting to see electric cargo bikes and all sorts of other ways of making that so that the typical family can benefit from that mobility.
I've been seeing a lot more of these electric bicycles in my neighborhood and at school drop off. A lot of them have like this extended board in the back with little handles, and like kids could sit in the back, and it really warms my heart. And I just hope that, more families see them and get them, because it also helps with all the traffic in front of school at drop off. But there's definitely seems to be like an increasing interest every day. I feel like I see more of these electric devices. But there's a question in the chat. If you, Jeff, could recommend resources or some cases to refer to for standardizing, installing and incentivizing the low charge infrastructure for these.
Yeah, well, for a design perspective, if you're not already following NACTO, they have just done a great job of making those resources available. NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, and that really makes me equally happy to some of those other things, because we worked on the original NACTO guide at a time when NACTO barely existed, and that bike guide that we created became one of the best, most downloaded transportation documents anywhere, and led to the NACTO Complete Streets Guide. And there's a lot of effort and a lot of cities trying to coordinate how do you do curbside electricity in general. And again, so much of the push for that is coming from the electric car makers. And again, I don't want to say that that's a bad thing. I think electrifying the car fleet's a great idea. How we can get those to happen simultaneously, and I know that refers back to the previous question, that while we're there, if we're going to be doing this, and not every location is going to make sense for both. There are places where, the car rental fleet at the airport isn't going to necessarily have a bike rental fleet, although there's certainly some people who might want to use that at that location as well. The train stations and other big hubs. Not every place is going to need that, but it would make sense if we could coordinate together while we're doing that kind of work. As far as guidance for design installations and the sort of planning side of things, we're just seeing that start to evolve. And again, through NACTO and other national organizations, People for Bikes has a group that's been working directly on the electrification issues from the industry side. That's still evolving, and I'm not really sure that we're quite at the point of standards yet. My business partner at Recharge, Julian Bouget, who some of you have met, is working just on the standards of how do the transmitter and receivers work, so that if you buy your device, it comes prepackaged and ready to be used with wireless stations. That work is happening globally with manufacturers in multiple countries trying to figure out, this is like all of our computer devices having a common USB connector, which did not exist for a long time. Those of us old enough to remember that era. And just an anecdote to that, just to show how quickly this is changing. Just last week, Best Buy announced that they're going to start selling micromobility. So Best Buy will be selling bikes and scooters and other devices. So we're starting to reach that level where there's going to be a lot of this stuff. And I don't think it's any different than the process that charging electric cars is going through. Brett, your comment about the train station, I've got a plug-in Prius, and all I need is 110. Like if I'm at the train station, I could charge my car overnight. I'm not in a rush. I don't need a Tesla supercharger station. And we're starting to see that sort of, well, there's stations that are there for for one brand or for one type of vehicle, and we're not necessarily going to, if you've got a Tesla, you know where their stations are. That didn't necessarily help you charge your Chevy Bolt, which didn't help with your Nissan Leaf. We could end up with the Tower of Babel here, which is really why we've been Recharge is focused on the idea of wireless charging, because that takes away all the plugs. All you need is to send and receive parts, but much easier said than done. Like I said, this is still a long shot, but we're happy to be working on it.
So there's a comment, Rima commented about motorized wheelchair users, and they also could benefit from public charging. We often hear from like our equity task force and disabled advocacy groups asking about how, they can convince their local governments to install charging for them. And I'm wondering, I've worked on the electric vehicle education and promotion side of things, and the whole curbside charging has always been an obstacle, especially in the Northeast and in regions like ours that have these old cities and this old infrastructure. And usually, the streetscape may not be EV ready or have the infrastructure in place to install a charging station. So I'm wondering if you've seen any examples elsewhere of complete streets policies that have been amended to kind of define EV readiness in them, or to require some sort of negotiation with utilities or bring the utilities into these projects from the beginning to upgrade infrastructure for electric vehicle charging or electric micromobility charging.
Right, there's a couple examples on that side of trying to make street side electricity more accessible. And just by way of example, we did an analysis of the city bike stations a while ago. Bear in mind, we first started laying all those stations out, and all the ones in New York bear my professional architecture stamp and seal from all those site plans, so I do know them fairly well. We spent a lot of effort avoiding electricity. At every station, we tried to make sure that we weren't on top of a manhole cover, away from a light pole, and literally in the design of those hundreds of sites, we were always trying to avoid those things. Stay away from the utilities. Now, if you look at those sites, probably 80+% of them are within 50 feet of electric power that is in the street, either underground or above. So a lot of that is more ready than we think, because we weren't really thinking of using it for that purpose. But a couple of good examples where they did that from the ground up. If you ever get a chance to visit Disney's community Celebration in Florida, which I know has had some challenges recently, but when they first built Celebration, it was designed for small scale electric vehicles. They were thinking mainly sort of glorified golf carts at the time, and there were power stations on every block. That was the way they coded the city from the beginning, and that was more than a decade, 20 years ago. They really did think about that, and be interesting to see how that's adapting to micromobility. I know that Seattle has been working on a really good citywide policy. We're actually meeting with some of their folks next week, and several other cities. Austin, Texas, has a citywide program to try to electrify the curb line, and you're going to see that all over the world. But it is a big challenge. It really is a rethinking of what we're using that electricity for. And for now, we were powering streetlights. We weren't really thinking about. In fact, there are multiple companies now that are on the market with streetlights that have power outlets built into them for public use. So you're just going to see a lot of that change happening at a very, hopefully, very rapid level. And that's we talk about needing broadband infrastructure as part of the big infrastructure bill. There's going to be a lot of need for curbside electricity. And back to Rima's comment, I couldn't possibly agree more that while we're, and this is so typical of the industry that I've worked in, we think of these active, physically fit people that are going to ride their bikes and do all this other great stuff. And we'd like to be that person a lot of the time, as much as we can. But we forget the fact that as a population, 20% of us will at some point experience some disability in our lives, whether it's permanent or temporary. And the need for, whether it's electric assist scooters or wheelchairs or other devices, is a constantly important thing. And there is no reason why, if we're going to provide stations that people can dock at in communities, that we wouldn't include those. the challenge has been doing that up until now has been that every one of these vehicles has a different battery. And where recharge comes in is that we're able to charge all those different batteries as long as the transmitter and receiver exists. So yes, I agree completely. If we can solve the problem of how to get the grid power to be used by these stations, they should be designed to accommodate all mobility assist devices.
Okay, and one more question. Do you have any suggestions about how to approach micromobility access in small towns and rural areas?
Yeah, I think there's going to be two things. It's a really good question because so much of the centers on the, the big cities, right? And in rural areas, the people's needs are a little different, but based on the same premise. You might have farther to go to work or to school or to the store, and those distances may exceed what you're going to walk or bike on a typical day. I think you're going to see two things. You're going to see individual consumers who are going to end up having these devices themselves, and they're going to go into town for the day or to to get to where they're going, and they're going to need to charge to be able to go back home. So there might be a lot of trips where the batteries don't last for the round trip in a rural area. We're going to see a lot of rural tourism that's going to have the same kinds of things, and there are companies in Switzerland that people are riding like Tour de France level bike tours now because they're riding electrics, and a lot of tourism that's getting people to see the landscape in places they were. Our national parks are going to say the same thing. I think we'll see that a lot with the great landscape of our region here in upstate New York. So then that gets back to at least having places where, and it could be your public library, a community center, a town hall, becoming those sort of local level places, maybe not for the constant use of multiple people charging. It's maybe more of an occasional use, but that simple electric outlet out there is going to really matter. And we've been thinking about the Empire State Trail corridor. It would be great to see all the canal locks have stations where people can come in and look. While you're there, you might as well charge your phone or your tablet. There's no reason why anything that, when it just put that in scale, the kind of power that Recharge is working on is the equivalent of no more than a toaster oven or a microwave. Whereas the kind of power that you need to charge an electric car is 1,000 times that. The amount of people that could be moved using micromobility is so much greater per watt of electricity than it is for charging each electric car. So if those locations and communities can charge those smaller scale devices, we're going to create more mobility that way. And that should make sense in and of itself.
Thanks, Jeff. So, we have other comments about, bicycling being the best way to see our communities and the world. And I think we can all agree on that. But thank you so much for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it. And if people have more questions for you, should they email you, or do you have a website right now?
Okay. Yeah, you can go to our website if you want to learn more about Recharge. It's www.recharge-e.com. And there's an info@recharge-e.com address as well. And like I said, I live here in our region, and certainly want to do whatever we can to make it a better place. And I just want everybody on this call, I want to thank you guys for everything you're doing. It is it's not always easy. It doesn't always yield the big successes we wish it would. But a lot has changed. There's a lot of great stuff happening. And this is one of those bright spots in a time that has not had a whole lot of them. The work that we're all doing is important, and I thank you all for doing it.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right, have a good day.
You too. Okay, so we have a few more things on our agenda, and hopefully I can get this to work. Does everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so a good segue into not everything is always easy. This is an update from New York State DOT. We had this discussion recently at our MPO Bike Ped Working Group, and this is just a reminder And, at some point I would like to have more of a discussion, not today, just because we have to end by 10:30, but on the process and how we sign bike routes and trails and roads for, alerting motorists that there are bikes there and sharing the road and everything. But right now, New York State DOT would like to remind everyone of what signs are appropriate to use and when. So the M18, and these are all in the New York State supplement. So the M18 is the only appropriate bike route signage for the state routes. And then below are your acceptable local and regional signage. And then for shared lane, the share the road plaques have been eliminated from the New York State supplement. So I know that there's still some up, but those are not, any new signage should either say may use full lane or the bike in lane. And at the bottom, there's some references to where in the supplement you can find the guidance. There is what DOT calls a TSMI, where they eliminated the share the road plaque. So that was done in 2013. And then something that came up, I was, a little bit surprised to hear this, but DOT does not, is discouraging communities from putting any signage about dismounting before crossing the road. For bicyclists, you cannot legally tell a bicyclist that they must dismount because it is a legal vehicle. And while they don't have the same protections as pedestrians and crosswalks, you are not supposed to tell them to dismount. So there was some cases where bicyclists have been hit in the crosswalk. And I know in most of them, the driver was either being reckless or under the influence. For those cases, they were ruled in the bicyclist's favor. So if we can not use them, either intersections at sidewalks or trails, they should not be used. Okay. And
Jen, can you just clarify, you're not allowed to tell them to dismount if they're in the road, or you're not allowed to tell them to dismount if they're in the crosswalk, or either? Because like my understanding is that when you're bicycling, you're not supposed to be in a crosswalk. Is that not?
Right. So, I mean, that has always been my understanding, but correct. Even if you're on a trail and about to cross at a crosswalk, you cannot tell bicyclists to dismount. Obviously, you can have some sort of warning that they should be aware that there is crossing vehicle traffic, and DOT is working on better guidance because we know this is kind of, an uncertain kind of area here, but yes, trails, sidewalks, roadways, we should not be telling bicyclists to dismount and cross because bicycles are legal vehicles that can be operated on the roadway.
So
Okay.
Jen, also we have a section of the Geyser Road Trail where the trail narrows to more of a sidewalk width over a bridgeway. There are signs there to dismount to go when you approach this area. Is that legal?
So according to DOT, it is not legal to tell bicyclists to dismount. So I think you can like prohibit bicycles in certain spaces, but you can't tell them they have to dismount to use a facility. If it is an actual sidewalk and the city has, a law that you can't bicycle on the sidewalk, I've seen like the stamp on the sidewalk where there's just a bicycle with a line through it. But you can't tell people to dismount.
Maybe a sign saying they can use the road, can use the full lane if it's that unsafe and accommodations weren't made for bicyclists to fit in there. Maybe that's the signage that could be put there, Tina.
So we're
but
gonna
to legally, well, I can get into that, but to legally ride in that area, you would have to actually head across the street. It kind of complicates it. So
Yeah, so we're gonna keep on talking with DOT about this, and the MPO Association is following this, so hopefully we'll get more guidance. I know there was a lot of questions from other MPOs, so so yeah, and if you have any other questions, feel free to contact me and I can put you in touch with the folks at DOT to get more clarification.
As I'm thinking about it, it might be worth following up to see whether or not you could do it as an advisory sign. So instead of a bicyclist must dismount, you could do narrow pavement or narrow bridge width, bicyclists may dismount, or something that should dismount, but something that's less prescriptive.
Thanks, Jordan. Okay. So moving on to the next agenda item, and this is a pretty big item. On Friday, Cdtc released the solicitation materials for the Transportation Improvement Program, or what we refer to as the TIP. So there are materials on our website. Project proposals are due November 5th, and these are capital projects. These are surface transportation projects and programs. Information on eligibility and everything else is on the website. We currently do not have funding information from DOT. There's still a lot of uncertainty with the transportation bill and with the infrastructure bill. So we may not have funding levels or any confirmation for funding availability until we're ready to program. There will be a workshop that will walk you through the process of applying. We have a new online application form, so this is new for everyone. We will walk folks through it. We will explain the process and explain how we will communicate with project sponsors along the way at our workshop on September 24th. So information on how to register for that is also on our website. Okay, just some brief capital coexist updates. Many of the projects are moving forward. If you are having some trouble implementing your project because of related to COVID and public health, please let us know. We are probably going to encourage folks who aren't sure they'll be able to implement their project by the end of the year to cancel and reapply again when there's another funding opportunity. I just wanted to kind of spotlight this recent project in Corinth that was done by their Parent and Teacher Student Association at an elementary school. They created a safety town just in the parking lot at school. They built and used materials to have like little civic buildings and a post office and crosswalks and stop signs, and had the kids go through to learn about traffic safety. And I've only seen pictures and spoke with the project sponsor, but it really sounds like it was a great project and had a lot of good feedback from the public. So as more projects are implemented, we'll share some photos and information to kind of spotlight them. A follow-up on our counting program. Jordan talked to you all last month about our eco counters and deployment of them. So we have already conducted some pilot tests on the Tedisco Trail in Ballston Spa, which isn't really a trail, a paved trail, but we did test it there. And then at Hudson Crossing Park in Schuylerville, where the Empire State Trail kind of, the Champlain Canal and the Mohawk Hudson, or the Empire State Trail, kind of intersect. We have been coordinating with Parks and Trails New York and now also the Empire State Trail to deploy counters, because Parks and Trails has counters, the Empire State Trail is purchasing counters, and then some local governments are purchasing counters. So our goal is to coordinate all of this data and make it available to everyone on a regular basis. Right now, Parks and Trails New York is installing a counter on Broadway and Waterville Elite for the new bike path there. And Empire State Trail plans on installing counters, 2 in Rensselaer County and 2 in Columbia County on the Albany Hudson Electric Trail. CDTC is installing one on Uncle Sam Bikeway for short term, and then long term at the Corning Riverfront Trail. So we will be looking for additional locations, and if you're working on a project and need data in the short term, please reach out and let us know, and we would be happy to work with you. A little bit related to our conversation this morning, the Smart Communities Toolbox project is underway. Looking at new and evolving technologies that can be deployed here in the capital region. Sometimes these don't have to be really big, fancy, expensive technology. Sometimes they're really small scale or really not even technology, but just a new way to coordinate data or improve operations. This project is going to evaluate those and how they can be applied in the capital region, and also provide examples of how similar size metropolitan areas or towns and cities have already implemented these projects, and create a plan and toolbox for local governments to do so. So things like electrifying the curb may be, part of that. Okay, and Rima, I'm going to have you give a quick update on the Ditch the Car campaign.
Yeah, so the Ditch the Car campaign is really coming along. We have about 80 participants this year. Over 1,200 trips have been recorded, and let me see, I have the stats here for how many miles. Almost 17,000 miles have been logged. So I'm really pretty happy with the level of engagement that we're getting with it. And if the people who sign up and participate, if they earn a badge, every month we're doing a raffle. We're raffling away some fun transportation related bundled prizes. So I'm raffling off 2 of those bundles every month, and we're going to do the challenge through October 8th. So if you haven't signed up yet, go to our website and sign up.
Thanks, Rima.
Welcome.
All right. So our next agenda item is the 2022-23 UPWP. So some of you may be familiar with the UPWP. It's our Unified Planning Work Program. It's typically a 2-year program that lists basically all of CDTC's tasks and the budget for each of those tasks. As you know, we have a new director, and we are going to try new things and modernize and pilot some new ideas. So this upcoming year, we're getting ready right now to develop a new UPWP, and we're looking at doing a 1-year program instead of a 2-year program. And we don't have details, but we will continue to update you on our plan to solicit for planning projects and programs in the region, to look for regional transportation and land use plans and programs that could be eligible for federal planning funds, and how we can integrate those into our work program instead of doing a whole bunch of separate solicitations for programs. So stay tuned for more information on that. That's something that we're working on developing. And just a reminder that the CDTC and CDRPC Technical Assistance Program is still open. There's a real range of projects and programs that are eligible through this program. Applications will be accepted through December 1st. If you have an idea for a project or program, just send us an email or give us a call. We will walk you through, whether it would be eligible and how to apply. As far as New Visions 2050, we are still obviously in our implementation stage, and we are returning to our regularly scheduled New Visions virtual learning series. Over the summer, we did a complete street summer series, and it was great. There were 3 different webinars for everything from obstacles that local governments face in implementing complete streets to how to do demonstration projects, to how to make open streets and play streets and safe streets projects a long-term or permanent thing in your town, city, or village. All those workshops can be found on our YouTube channel. They were recorded and they're uploaded there, and you can access them through our website. The next scheduled webinar for the New Visions Learning Series is Tuesday, September 21st at 3:30, and it's going to be on transportation and economic development, and really how the transportation system has contributed to growth and new opportunities in the region, and how we need to continue to innovate and shift to create more new opportunities and attract new employers. So we have Katie Newcomb from the Center for Economic Growth. She's really great. She's talked to lots of potential employers that are looking to relocate to the capital region. So she knows, what these big employers are looking for and how they believe cities and regions can attract talent. We also have Sean McGuire from the town of Colony, Jamie LaHutt from Metroplex and from the CDTA board, and Megan Daly from the Port of Albany, who will all talk about their experience working in planning and how transportation has intersected with their economic development initiatives. In October, our webinar will be about the TIP. So different from the workshop, but really going through the whole TIP process. How does it work? And we'll have DOT folks on to really talk about, on their side of things, how everything works and what to expect after you submit your application. November, we'll be talking about GISs as a transportation planning tool. And we haven't confirmed anything for December yet, but if you have a topic idea, we would love to hear it. We are still accepting requests for trainings, and they can be submitted through our CDTC website, or you can just give me a call or send me an email. Okay, so Steve and Lindsay, can you give us an update on CDPHP cycle and Scoot?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Jen. Thanks for having us, and good morning, everybody. We are having a record-breaking season number 5 for CDPHP cycle. Our previous high for a season was in 2019, where we had just over 41,000 rides. 22 weeks into this season, we are now at 48,000. So we are just seeing how high we can set the bar with the last 2.5 to 3 months of this riding season, which we're super excited about. We had having a great year up in Saratoga. This season, we added the Gideon Putnam Hotel as a cycle access partner, allowing their guests to ride the bikes for free as part of their stay at the hotel. It's a kind of a stem off of our universal access for fixed route riding is doing with the bikes. So Gideon Putnam signed up this year, and they've had some tremendous ridership numbers. People riding the bikes through the park, riding into downtown, getting something to eat, going out for recreational rides. So that's been a great score for us this year. Our new addition to the service area this year, Warren County, Glens Falls, Queensbury, and Lake George. They are quickly approaching their first 1,000 rides for the season. So, we've got 20 bikes up in that area. Lake George has been the most popular portion of their riding system so far, which we completely expected. But it's been great. The program is growing up there. Steve and I are doing a lot of community events and outreach opportunities to teach people about the bike share system, how it works, how easy it is for them to sign up for memberships and ride the bikes. So we know that people are seeing the bikes. It's now just teaching them that they can in fact use them anytime they want for whatever purposes. So we're excited about that. We also put some bikes by SUNY Adirondack right on their campus. We were at their orientation day last week to again teach students about the bikes, how affordable they are, how accessible they are for them to use. So we anticipate the students getting their hands on those bikes and moving them around for the next, couple months of the fall. As far as the scooters, we've been doing a series of educational pop-up demos around Albany, Troy, and Schenectady. We put the scooters out, and we realized that we wanted to really kind of take our time in launching the Scoot system. We thought the education component of this was very important. With electric scooters never being in this area before, and some of the reputation that they have from other cities, we wanted to make sure that we did this the right way. So, we haven't actually launched the scooter sharing service yet, but we are giving folks opportunities multiple times a week to try out the scooters, ride them around a little bit. So, we announce all of these pop-up demos on our social media accounts, and still continuing to work with our municipality partners and police department partners and planning groups and different organizations to still promote the program, but just make sure that we get to talk to as many people as we can and let them try the scooters out before we actually launch the service, which we think will be next spring. But again, we want to continue to do these demos to give people an opportunity to try them out and let us know what they think, and lets us, teach people the way that we've built our program, which is a little bit different than most other scooter sharing systems around the country, in the sense that we have locks and racks, which you don't usually see in scooter share systems. It's more of just parking in a painted block on the street, or just parking areas, not necessarily locking scooters to racks. But that's one of our main focuses in trying to control sprawl and kind of protect the scooters a little bit too. So that's where we are with that. I'll open it up to Steve to talk about any of the operational sides, anything that he wants to add in from that. Steve, you still there?
Can you hear me?
There you go.
All right. Sorry, I'm mobile right now, actually doing operation stuff. So again, I want to echo Lindsay and say thanks for having us. We love being included with this, and all the benefits and everything from Cdtc we're going to be taking advantage of as time goes on. Especially the TIPS program could really benefit and the infrastructure related to it, and piggybacking sort of stuff as far as charging infrastructure and all these things that are going to be on the horizon here. Going to be very important to have this group and all the stakeholders in this call sort of involved in helping to push this thing forward operationally and logistically. So from that standpoint, things are going really well. We're seeing very heavy usage from our part-time residents, i.e. students, both SUNY, RPI, and then now Union College is really getting on board. We're really seeing much higher compliance with some of the parking regulations that we put in place. And again, cities are being very, very helpful and, allowing bikes to be parked to street signs and things like that. I also think that non-user citizenry and municipal government employees are seeing these things and are learning to be okay with them in their neighborhoods. Neighborhood associations are again on board. So as we are midway through year 5, these are now integrated into the community, and I really think for a lot of people starting to become a daily transportation option. Obviously in the capital region, leisure riders, some of our tourists in Saratoga, and even the tourists in the Albany area are really taking advantage of them. But we're really starting to see the wheel turn as far as commuters, daily users, whether it's a one-way trip down the hills that we have and then a bus ride or alternative transportation trip up the hills. Again, they're really becoming in daily use. The bikes are getting much heavier use. We're up on a consistent basis over one ride per bike per day. And so for a system as small as ours, that's a pretty heavy usage. Again, Lindsay highlighted, we are, smashing through the ceiling of our totals in the last couple of years. So it is really picking up. And a lot of that is thanks to our university partners. We see a lot of migration from the uptown campus downtown, and vice versa. So again, making a mobility option for students to get to and from. Also, we see a lot more parking on a consistent basis in places of work. Again, speaking to employers that want to enter into our market and are thinking of moving here, having an active bike share, a well-maintained bike share, and a successful bike share is a benefit to those employers trying to get employees to their jobs. Also, we're seeing a lot more of what we consider access membership. Employers locally providing bikes to their employees, and those bikes are moving heavily. St. Peter's bike rack is one of our more active. Albany Medical Center's bike rack is very active. The OGS bike racks that are on OGS property are very active. So again, that speaks to not just leisure riders and not just sort of one-off, hey, let's try the bike riders, but again, much more commuters, daily users, and people who are using them to access their jobs and further their careers. So again, operationally, we are not seeing any huge issues, and our operation is obviously getting more streamlined. We are increasing our footprint and local employment options for people working directly with us. And just, we are fast forward, moving ahead. CDTA is obviously fully committed to the next iteration of transportation here, and really all positive stuff. Excited to hear any feedback, anything that you guys are hearing in the world or from your constituencies. Very interested in tweaking our operations and making any changes that people see fit that we can incorporate. So again, thanks again for all your support and for having us today.
Thanks, Stephen. Lindsay. I think Tina from Saratoga Springs has a question or comment.
Yeah, let me get my hand down here. Yeah, so thank you for providing, the feedback on the bike share program. One of the questions I have that I've gotten internally is we have had other companies, or at least one company that's a scooter company, reach out to us about launching a scooter share program in Saratoga Springs. And it came up as a conflict where I'm just wondering, CDTA, because you are the Public Transportation Authority, what is like, do we then have to do some type of open solicitation if we have a vendor that wants to launch something like this, and then we also have a public authority that wanted to launch something like this?
Not to my knowledge. We know that other scooter companies have reached out to other municipalities, pretty much every municipality around this area. Other cities at this point have told them that they work with CDTA on bike share, and at that point we had also had conversations that we were looking to bring e-bikes and e-scooters based on when the legislation passed last year. And those other cities at that point told those vendors who were coming in, we work with CDTA and told them to contact us. So we've had conversation with those vendors as well. But right now, Troy, Schenectady, and Albany, as far as the electric scooters, they're on board with our program. So, we've had conversations with Saratoga. They were not interested in the scooters this year, wanted to basically learn more, do their own research is what we were told, and potentially do an RFP for next spring on bringing electric scooters to Saratoga Springs. So, we keep them in the loop. But, when they kind of told us that they weren't ready and weren't really all that interested this year and wanted to take their time in the off season, we kind of backed off and let them do their thing and their research. So that's kind of what I can tell you as far as how everything came together scooter wise with the the initial 4 cities that we started with the bike and that we do have operating agreements with. So that's that's what we know at this point with our conversations with City of Saratoga.
Thank you.
Yep.
Does any of the other municipalities that are on the call, have you had any of that feedback about needing public solicitations, even though we have a public authority involved?
I mean, we got solicited by, I think it was Bird, for scooter share, and we basically said same thing what Lindsay had said. We're like, yeah, we were working with Cdta. They're rolling it out slowly. We don't have any real interest in like rushing through this. And we kind of encouraged them to go and talk to Cdta and see like what kind of, I don't know if there was a way for them to work together, but we did not really go through any further process based on procurement or anything else. This is not a City of Troy initiative, so we didn't see the need to do that.
Okay. Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Lindsay, and
Welcome.
Tina. That was a good question. Thanks. Okay, so we do have to wrap up pretty soon, but just to briefly go through our planning initiative status. So sorry, this went out in with the agenda, and it will go out with the notes, and it can be found on our website, but it lists all of our ongoing linkage studies and their status. We also list all of our technical assistance program projects that are ongoing. Since this went out, we have added a technical assistance program. We will also be working with Saratoga County, City of Saratoga Springs, Town of Wilton, on a trail connection project. So next month, we will add that to our planning initiative status table. And then we have a number of other planning initiatives that don't really neatly fit into the linkage or technical assistance programs, including a loop trail feasibility study that we're working on with Albany County, the regional truck parking study, our Smart Communities guidebook, the ADA self-evaluation and transition plan project, data collection services. Not here is the Patroon Creek Greenway feasibility study and the bus lane feasibility. Sorry, apologies. I blanked on that for a moment, but we will attach the most updated status spreadsheet to the meeting notes for everybody to review. And if anyone has any questions about it, please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to talk about any of those ongoing projects. So today, just in the interest of time, we won't go around and do planning and project updates, but if you do have a planning and project update that you want to provide, please email it to me and I will include it in our notes. So with that, thank you so much. And our next scheduled meeting is Tuesday, October 12th. So hopefully we will line up a presentation and get an agenda out very soon within the next couple of weeks. If you have any questions before then, please feel free to reach out as always. So with that, I hope everyone has a good week. Bye, everyone.